Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, a show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Joe Lalo, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Lindsay Baroker.
And today we're welcoming a guest, David Gaughran. David is the author of several historical fiction novels, a science fiction thriller, and a couple of books for self-publishers, Let's Get Digital and Strangers to Superfans. He's also a bit of an industry watchdog and an analyst of the Amazon rankings and what's working as far as marketing goes. So we're going to ask him a few questions about that. Lindsay, you want to get things started?
All right. Hi, David. Welcome to the show. We'll just start out with the usual. How did you get started with writing and self-publishing?
Well, like all of you, I'm sure, and anyone else watching and listening, I was scribbling like from a young age. I remember I entered some short story competition at the age of 6, which still remains the only short story competition or competition of any kind that I have placed in. And the prize was to read out the short story in the local library to the class that was like a year younger. And it was a great early lesson in always read out your story before you send it out into the world, because if you've got some kind of MacGuffin in it, which has like a 26 syllable, like it was some kind of science fiction-ish short story. I can't remember the plot or anything, but there was some magical device in it which had a kind of a 26 syllable name. And I didn't realize what a problem that would be until I actually had to perform it in public. So yeah, that totally bombed. So that was the start of my career. And then I took a pause for about 30 years. and then when the whole ebook thing kicked off, I dove back in. But like a lot of you probably, I was trying to get traditionally published for ages, and I couldn't crack that. Got a no from pretty much every single agent in the English language world, and decided then to dive into self-publishing, and that worked out pretty well for me.
Awesome. I know I named my dragons horribly unpronounceable things, and I just feel really sorry for my audiobook narrator. But
yeah, does he send you death threats or anything like that?
Fortunately, the publisher is in the middle, so I
Yeah.
go to the publisher. So, but why don't you tell us a little bit about, you're kind of known for reporting on kind of scammy things and people scamming on Amazon. How did you get into doing that on your blog?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it wasn't anything I planned out. It just like I only started blogging because it wasn't quite a bet. It was more of an argument. I was hanging out in this writer forum that was more tuned towards traditional publishing and finding agents and stuff. And when self-publishing kicked off, they were kind of quite skeptical of the idea. But I was hearing all this stuff and seeing that it wasn't just people like Joe Conrad who had a big backlist and a bit of industry knowledge. It was people who were brand new and hadn't published anything via traditional publishers before, were starting to sell some books and build an audience. So that to me was more convincing than any arguments going back and forth, and gave me the sense that maybe I could do this too. But there was a lot of these people who had been trying to get agents, especially the ones that weren't that successful yet. They'd spent years trying to get an agent, and they weren't too happy that this side door had kind of opened up, and all these people are rushing through who hadn't put their dues in for years, going to conferences and trying to putter up all the right agents. Anyway, there was anyone who was around in 2011, 2012 knows all those arguments that were going around. But I said, look, okay, I'm nobody. Nobody knows who I am. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't have a Facebook page. I don't have any readers. I don't have any novels in the trunk. I've only got one. I haven't finished it yet. But I have a couple of short stories, so I'm going to self-publish them. I'm going to see how it goes, see if I can do it, see if I can find any readers or make any money out of it. I'll finish my novel and I'll probably self-publish that. And I'll blog about it all along the way. We'll see like what a total unknown can do, And so I only did it to kind of settle an argument. And then the blog just took off right away. It was really weird. Like I was just in the right place at the right time. It was the summer that self-publishing went mainstream, and I was just lucky to be going through the steps that everyone wanted to go through themselves. Like I was looking for an editor, and I would blog about how to find an editor. And I'd only learned this information like 10 minutes beforehand, and I was blogging about it. But I think I think some people responded to it because I wasn't speaking from the position of an expert necessarily in language they wouldn't understand. It was relatable for them because I'd literally gone through that 10 minutes before. And there was all these people in my comments who were doing the same thing at the same time. So there was a real sense of community where people were also trying to find their editors, and people were sharing names with each other and tips about covers and marketing, and we all kind of took off at the same time. And I think that helped me a lot personally. Like, it helped me hone my own ideas about what you have to do, and we all kind of helped each other, which was kind of what self-publishing is all about. Like, maybe it's losing a little bit of that now as it gets bigger and bigger, but definitely in the early days, it was all about, let's crack the system together, let's help each other, let's beat the system kind of thing, you know. And that was a lot of fun too, you know.
Yeah, you actually had your book. I remember reading you've got Let's Get Digital, which is the sort of basics how to, and then it was Let's Get Visible. And, you know, I remember I was already publishing at the time and selling some books, but I still enjoyed it because you were so analytical about, like, what's working with the Amazon algorithms, what promo should I book? And now you've kind of replaced that, I guess, with the new Superfans book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what's changed?
Yeah, well, like a lot has changed. When I released, like, Let's Get Digital first came out in 2011, and Let's Get Visible was 2013 or something. And at the time, Let's Get Visible was kind of a new approach to marketing. Like, it wasn't one that I invented or anything. There was authors who were a lot more successful than me, like Ed Robertson and David Gaughran and Phoenix Sullivan and a whole bunch of others. And they kind of allowed me to kind of trail them around and pester them with questions about what they were doing and why they were doing it. And eventually I put it together in this kind of book. And the whole approach was this kind of idea of visibility marketing, where you tailor all of your promotions and your marketing to make sure that you're best placed on Amazon and visible to as many of the customers in your target market as possible. And that was a really good approach for 2 or 3 years. But that was okay when there was like 1.5 million books in the Kindle store. I actually remember people freaking out when it hit 1 million. I think that was in 2012. It hit 1 million books in the Kindle store, which seems kind of quaint now, and we're north of 7 million now, I think. So, like, that alone means that the challenges, you know, have evolved quite significantly. And it's not enough just to aim to be visible on Amazon. Like, that will get you pretty far, but it's not enough. And when I finally came around to the idea of, okay, I'm ready to do another edition of this book, and I started taking a look at what are the challenges people are facing today, both beginners trying to start out and also people who might be selling pretty well already or making a living out of it or on the way to that, and they want to step up to the next level. Like, what do they do? Like, it's not enough to say, I want to be more visible on Amazon. There's more stuff that you need to get your head around. So I wanted to kind of get a handle on all that, but put it in a kind of a systematic and understandable system, because there's so many different things, you know, that an author today could theoretically need to learn, from mailing lists and automations to metadata. Like, you could get pulled in a million different directions, and I think we all get driven a little bit crazy by all the potential things that we could be doing every day, while also trying to carve out enough writing time to produce new work all the time, which is the most important thing. So I wanted to try and give people a little kind of system, a kind of a paradigm where they can look at what they need to do and prioritize and take it step by step, so it's not overwhelming.
One of the things you mention in the book and early on is talking about Facebook, but not just advertising on Facebook, kind of looking at the audience insights section on Facebook to learn more about the demographic that's following you. Could you kind of talk about that and how people what they should be looking for maybe, and just how they can use that to their advantage?
Yeah, well, like the whole book and the whole system of marketing that I'm trying to outline in the book is all built on a concept that should be familiar to most writers. The idea of your ideal reader, that if you've ever read that amazing book by Stephen King on writing, which I highly recommend, even if you don't like his novels, like, you should read that book. It's really, really interesting for any writer. But he talks a lot about the concept of an ideal reader, which is the person that you're always writing for. And for him, it's his wife, Tabitha. But for you, it could be yourself. It could be someone else, or you might have a very clear idea of the exact person that you're writing for and that what that demographic is. But the whole point of this book is that we're always looking at, and companies are always looking at their marketing from their own perspective. They're looking at from the perspective of their company, their quarterly reports, their products, their shareholders. But the big change in marketing in the last few years that publishing hasn't caught up with yet is this idea of the buyer's journey, where you do this POV shift into the shoes of your customer and then start looking at your marketing from their perspective. So that's what I'm trying to bring into the world of books, so that we start thinking about our ideal reader, who we're writing for, and then putting ourselves into their shoes when it comes to looking at our marketing and analyzing why things are selling and not selling. Because it's, once we start doing that, once you have a clear idea of who you're writing for and how they respond to various different types of marketing, because if you're selling a product to someone who's in their 60s or someone who's in their 20s, you'll talk to them in a different way, or you should be doing that, or else it will be less effective. So it's very important to always remember who you're writing for and how they feel about various marketing messages, and just the journey they take from first encountering your book cover to hopefully becoming the kind of fan who will actually sell your book to other readers, and identifying like where the pitfalls are along the way, where they could potentially fall away, why they might put your book down or why they mightn't click on the cover, and really like drilling down into the whole journey from start to finish. Because I think we always focus on discovery too much, and that's something I talked about a lot in the book, that we always reach for discovery solutions. Like if a book stops selling, we try and get a book club ad, or we throw together our Facebook campaign, or we try and do something to throw traffic on the book. And we don't look at all these other issues that could be the reason why we're not getting a return, or why sales have started to drop off. And I think it's important to take this kind of holistic view of a series or a book, and try and drill down and identify where the real problem is, because sometimes it's not traffic, and if you've got a problem somewhere else in the chain and you just start throwing traffic at it, you're just going to be wasting that money. You're not going to get the return that you could. And I think today's environment, since Kindle Unlimited has come in, especially the last year or two, the margins for error are tighter and tighter. Whether you're in KU or not, you're affected by it. And I think the power curve is getting more severe, so that I think the guys at the top are earning more, and everyone else is kind of, they might have released 6 more books this year and spending a little more on marketing, and they're still making the same or less than they were last year. So it's getting tougher, even if you're doing all the right things. So I think, whereas before you could have skated by on some things like branding, or maybe you weren't paying a huge amount of attention what you're doing in the world of email, I think those days are started a little bit numbered, where if you're wondering why your sales are flatlining even though you're running a bit faster, maybe it's time to look at a couple of areas where you didn't pay enough attention up to now.
Now, when it comes to analyzing performance, and specifically when you're analyzing, your audience, obviously Facebook has tremendous analytics, and you talked a little bit about, audience insight and stuff like that on Facebook. Do you find that Facebook is useful for building an audience in addition to quantifying and analyzing it?
Well, yeah, like the data you get from Facebook will only be as useful as how many likes you have there already. Like if you only have 500 likes or something, you're not going to get hugely useful information. But if you have, a few thousand likes there, you'll start getting information which might be useful to you. So I would caution anyone on making huge assumptions based on a small amount of likes on their page. But yeah, no, I think the thing about Facebook, aside from any current scandals or movements or anything else, is that I think they have 2 billion daily active users now. So it's not just where your readers might be, it's where everyone's readers are every day, So like, we're always trying to reach readers. Like, we might take out an ad on ENT, or we might come up with whatever kind of marketing to try and reach readers. They're on Facebook every day. So if you have decided you're not going to advertise on Facebook, or you're not going to build up a presence on Facebook, you're closing a door to the most obvious place where you can reach readers. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and it's certainly not cheap a lot of the time, but you can't close that door completely. Like, you can at least build up, in a passive sense, a presence on Facebook, and you should, at the very minimum, do that.
So let me ask you this. What sort of encouragement or incentive do you offer to get more people to either follow or like you on Facebook?
Well, I think, aside from spending money, which I don't actually think is the best way to solve that problem necessarily, I think the best thing to do, and I actually had some hands-on experience doing this for my partner. I built up a Facebook page for her just in the last few months on literally a shoestring budget, like only a couple of dollars here and there, just to kind of test out a couple of theories. But basically what you need to do is think about the kind of content that your audience likes. Post it regularly to your page, and then every so often you can drop $1 or $2 and just boost that. And this is like super low budget, and you can even do this on no budget, but even being able to throw a couple of dollars a week on it will actually get your page rolling a lot faster. And I think she has something like 1,000 likes on her page now, and spent very little money and not a huge amount of effort. Like in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, I was posting there every day, and now I've scaled back to like once a week or something. But it's more about thinking about, again, like your ideal reader. What else do they like? Like, so if I'll give a bookish example, because she's not in the world of books. Let's say you write time travel romance. Obviously, the big thing in that genre right now is Outlander. So maybe something to do with the TV show, you could post that one day. Or if there was an interview with Diana Gabaldon, you could post that another day. Or you think of something else, and it doesn't, it's like anything with social media. It doesn't necessarily have to directly relate to you or your books. It's just something that your target audience is interested in, and post it to your page. And then you can boost that post just by $1 or $2. And actually a lower spend spread over a longer time is better than dropping $20 in one day. And you can do that and aim it at your target audience, like boost the page, or sorry, boost the post that you've posted to your page. Post it to your page first, get a few likes from the people who have already liked it. So you're getting a bit of social proof straight away. And then turn it into an ad by boosting it, or actually going into the ads manager and turning it into an ad. And put a small budget behind it and aim it at people who already like time travel romance or whatever the closest interest is in Facebook. And you're not even advertising anything directly about you or your books. You're not saying buy my book, you're not saying like my page, because this is a really, really cold audience, and you don't want to hit them with a hard message like that straight away. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make with Facebook ads, where they just go in and they're like, okay, I've got $500 to spend. I'm going to put up a link to my book, and I'm just going to advertise it to the science fiction audience. And they don't get any sales, and they don't know why. But that's like turning up at a party and trying to sell insurance before you've even done the small talk. You have to warm them up a little bit. So post content to your page that your audience will like. Give it a little boost now and then if you have the budget for that. If you don't worry about it. The audience will come. It'll be slower. But if you have like $1 or $2 to spend now and then, just on that, you'll get the likes rolling on your page. It's about a quarter of the price of actually advertising for likes. Like, never actually advertise for likes. That's a really, really expensive way to get likes. It'll end up costing you $1 per like or more, and that's not sustainable. But if you do it this way, you can do it for like a quarter of the price or less, and really build up much better, high quality likes, because they're people who like the content that you're putting out. That is your target audience. So, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned it before that you were posting on a daily basis, and you scaled that back to about once every week. Is that like the barest minimum you would post just to try and keep your readers and viewers engaged?
Well, no, like you can, like, there's some people who will post religiously every day, and they'll set it up on, or they might have a VA doing it for them, or they might set it up on one of these automated things, whatever. I actually don't bother with any of that. Like, I post when I feel like it. I don't stress about it too much. Maybe I could optimize that and it would be better. I don't know, but I wouldn't get too worked up about it. It's not my number one priority every day. If I find a piece of content that I know my audience will like, I'll share it. And if I don't sweat. I don't spend half an hour looking for a piece of content if I don't have something to share. Maybe at the start, it's good to, hit the ground running a little bit, because especially when, you go to someone's page and they see they've got 3 likes on one post, you're like, well, there's no point liking that page. Like, this could be a dead page. So if you're starting let's say I'm starting a new pen name this month, so I'm going to be starting a new Facebook page. But before I start that, I'll probably get a few bits of content lined up, like a few articles or whatever that the readers might potentially like. And I'll probably line up like 8 or 9 things and then have them ready to post every day. But I wouldn't worry about that in an ongoing way. That's just to kind of hit the ground running. But in an ongoing way, for a page that's already active, that has a few likes, and they can see there's a history of content there, it's kind of like a blog. Like, you know, if you go to a blog and you see they haven't written a post, or they've written one post since 2006, you're not going to sign up, you know, for email updates, because you're like, well, this blog is dead. It's kind of like that with a Facebook page. If people see that people are posting regularly and it's stuff that you like and it's interesting, you'll like the page. Otherwise, you'll be like, what's the point? You know?
Yeah, I've got on Facebook, I have to remind myself, because it's actually been a while since I've done this, but just even mentioning at the back of the book, hey, I've got a Facebook page, then you're getting somebody that already finished the book, and so of course they're going to be your ideal reader if they then cared enough to go to your Facebook page.
Yeah, you should definitely like do that cross-pollination. Like when I switched my whole approach to email earlier this year. I went from a new release only mailing list to a weekly thing for my nonfiction. But I knew I was worried about the promise that I was breaking to my subscribers when they first signed up. I said, I won't bother you every week. You know, I'll only email you when I have a new release. So when I was doing that pivot, I had to be like upfront with them and say, look, I'm doing this. I'm changing to a regular newsletter. And if you don't want that, that's cool. And you can either follow me on Amazon or follow me on BookBub. And like, I've no idea how many people follow me on Amazon. They don't deign to share that information with us. But I could see on BookBub straight away, I got like 400 or 500 new followers. And I'd never thought to ask my email subscribers if they want to follow me on BookBub. And it was amazing. And I wasn't even pushing it. I was kind of putting it as an aside, like, if you want to unsubscribe, if you don't want a weekly newsletter, please feel free to do that. It's all cool. But if you just want new releases, follow me here. And then like 400 people did, you know, and a lot of the people who did they didn't unsubscribe. They just wanted to also follow me there. So, you know, I think we're sometimes reluctant to bother people too much and say like, oh, you know, follow me here, follow me there. I feel like it's a bit of overkill. But I think, you know, especially if you can find an organic way of working it in, don't be afraid to seek that cross-pollination. Like I'm getting a new website done, which is going to launch soon enough, and I'm putting in BookBub buttons everywhere along with the usual Facebook and Twitter stuff. Because why not? You know, it's not something that's in people's faces, but for people who want to do it, well, like, why would I put a barrier up between them wanting to do it?
Yeah, and I have to remember that people come in new all the time, and they haven't necessarily, like in my case, I have a lot of series out, so I just did a Facebook post that was like, oh, by the way, you know, these 4 books are free, and if you want to try like series starters. And of course I got a lot of interaction from people that are like, oh yeah, I forgot I haven't tried that series yet. But then that was a good one to boost, because now I've got I'm using the books to read links and getting a lot of clicks from random strangers. When you boost posts, do you go in and target what you've learned is your ideal demographic?
Well, when it comes to like really low budget boosts, I actually find, or really low budget pushes on Facebook, I actually find boosts can sometimes be more economical than doing a proper ad. Like I know how to do a proper ad, and I have business managers set up, and I can get into all the refined targeting and all that. But if you're only spending like $5 over 5 days, I think, you know, doing a dumb boost. Well, I will go in and, you know, select the targeting in the kind of watered down version of the interface they have there now. But I think sometimes that works out more economical than actually setting up a proper ad. But when it comes to more bigger budget stuff, I wouldn't do boosts. I would get in and do proper ads.
You mentioned at one point maybe doing a character sheet for your ideal reader. Is that something outside of Facebook that it can be useful? Because the other platforms you can't really drill down and target quite as much. It's sort of like if you get a BookBub ad, it's going out to all the science fiction people. It's different if you do the pay-per-click ones, of course. But how can that be useful in other contexts?
Well, I would actually say that you know, the Facebook data is like this idea of getting an idea of your ideal reader and filling out a character sheet, if that's your way your mind works. Like if that's how you normally plot a book, where you fill out a character sheet for your hero and your love interest and all that, then definitely do that for your ideal reader. If that's the way your mind works, just go for it. Go crazy with it. But if it's not, then you can skip that step. You know, if you're more of a gut-based person where you just have a sense of that stuff and you just feed it little bits of information now and then work that way. That's fine. But yeah, no, I think your concept of your ideal reader should be separate from Facebook. It should be something more fundamental than that you use to inform everything you do. Not just because we already do it for our writing. We're already like, oh, my readers wouldn't like that. If we're thinking about, you know, if the heroine might cheat on the hero, you think, oh no, my readers would go crazy if that happens. Like you already have, like we already do this even on an unconscious level. I'm just trying to get people to think that way when they're marketing also, not just when they're writing. Thinking about their ideal reader, thinking about how they will feel reading this blurb, how they will feel with this whatever marketing contraption you have constructed, and then walking yourself through the steps of your reader slowly getting converted to being a super fan, because it is a multi-stage process. Like sometimes we think that they're going to click on our BookBub link and we've either got an instant super fan or we don't, but it's a slow process. You know, sometimes they will buy our book and it'll sit in their Kindle for a couple of months. Sometimes they'll read our book and they might like it, but maybe they won't become like a huge super fan until book 3 of the series. And maybe they won't if we don't look after them in terms of nurturing them via email, you know, or allowing them to otherwise have a connection with us as the author via Facebook or something else. You know, often we have to, like if I look at the authors who have like huge raging army of super fans that are like basically the author just puts the book up on, I know a few authors like this, they just put the book up on Amazon. They don't even hit their list and already it's at like, you know, 200 in the Kindle store. And they're like, yeah, I won't hit my list until next week. And I'm like, are you crazy? I'd be hitting my list straight away. And they're like, no. These guys will do the selling for me over the next week. And I've been watching these guys and what they do. And like, they've nurtured that relationship. They've created a connection between them and the reader. And they do it in so many different smart ways, not just by, you know, keeping in touch by email, but also like they weaving things throughout the story that their readers care about, and also throughout all their marketing, like their covers, their blurbs, everything. Like everything is, I kind of think of it like an orchestra, like where all these elements are in harmony with each other. And like if you look at some of the very biggest sellers on Amazon, like I love CD Rice. I think she's amazing. Like if you look at her covers, her blurbs, even her bio, everything is just perfect. And I can see it's all just like hitting the exact same note for the people that she's targeting. She's so good at it.
Now, when we talk about ideal reader, how much of this is like proactive and how much is reactive? Because a lot of times, like if someone's writing to market, then they're sort of constructing their ideal reader beforehand and writing a book they think that reader will like. Whereas maybe other people will, when they try to interpret the performance of their books, discover that they don't really know who their ideal reader was at first. Like what is the adaptation process, I should say?
Well, the second scenario you outlined, the more ad hoc one, is definitely like how I approach my historical fiction. But now I'm going to be trying some science fiction stuff, and I actually started with a book title, and then I started constructing a plot. So it's like I'm doing everything backwards, and it's really fun, just as an experiment, you know. But yeah, it doesn't really matter how you get there, you know. Like it's kind of like writing a book. We all do it in different ways. Some people will plot out everything to the most, like some people have outlines which are longer than my books, you know, or longer even than the book they end up with. They're like a guy who starts out with a block of wood and they whittle down to a story, you know, whereas I start with a couple of splinters and I try and build something out from that. But like we're all different, but as long as you end up in the place where you have an idea of who you're writing for, what motivates them, what turns them on, what turns them off, as long as you have a good sense of that person and how they will feel about various different types of marketing, you're fine. It doesn't matter how you've actually ended up in that place.
So if you discover that your ideal fans aren't exactly the target audience you were aiming for, you know, wrong genre, different age groups, whatnot, aside from changing your writing, you know, what steps would you take in order to modify, sort of essentially to attract your ideal reader, if that's even possible?
Yeah, well, I think there's a bunch of potential problems wrapped up in the scenario there. Like a common one would be where you've written one kind of book, but you've got a cover for a different kind of book, and you're attracting the wrong kind of reader. And the first sign of that might be after you've launched your book, and then you see your also bots maybe are a bit off from where you wanted them to be, and that's kind of puzzling to you. And then you realize from talking to readers or fellow authors that they're like, well, your cover gives off a bit of a YA vibe, and you weren't aiming that at audience. That's something that can happen quite often. Like maybe you picked up a pre-made that was cheap, or maybe you commissioned an illustration, but you didn't quite land the plane in terms of the design, and you attracted some of the wrong readers. Like, I think, like, I used to think covers were kind of easy, and the more experience I get, the harder and harder I think it is to nail a cover, because like it really has to attract the right reader straight away. And if it's off, like with any of the elements of your book, if it's off, you'll attract the wrong readers, and that can hurt you in so many ways. Like either they'll buy the book and they'll mess up your also bots, or they won't buy the book and they'll mess up your conversion rates, which Amazon's system then will look at your book and think it's not something very attractive to readers, because only 10% of people coming to the Amazon page are buying it. So they'll think Amazon's algorithms will think it's a bad book, when it mightn't be. It might be just that your cover is attracting the wrong reader.
I've definitely had the experience where I've jumped genres and then sent out the email to all my fantasy readers. Like, come check out my contemporary mystery, guys. And then that's where you kind of end up with that conversion rate. Like maybe your true fans are going to buy it, but you're going to not appeal to your regular folks and maybe screw things up a bit.
There's actually no way that can go well for you. Like either they'll buy the book and they mess up your also bots, or they don't buy the book and they mess up your conversion rate. And like, I'm totally speaking from experience here. I remember launching a book a couple of years ago, and I was doing an experiment launching at 99 cents, and it was a historical novel, pushing it to my writer crowd, and a lot of them bought it, and then all my also bots were writer books. Like, and this happens, this is a danger for any author who works in more than one genre. Invariably, one of the niches that you're working in is going to be more successful than the other. So unless you actually build walls between the two, or at least wait a few weeks before you tell your other audience about the new book, you're going to have some problems. So like, I don't know how quickly, Lindsay, it was that you told your other audience about this book, but I think sometimes if you wait a couple of months and the also bots are firmly attached and it's kind of safe, then it's kind of safe to tell your other audience, hey, I don't know if you like fantasy also, but I released this thing a couple of months ago that you might like. And then I think you're kind of okay with it. But like, the more I drill down into this, like, I wish I'd written my nonfiction under a different name than my fiction, because like my nonfiction hurts my fiction now. And I think I might actually rebrand my historicals under a slightly different name, just with an initial or something. That'll be enough to just distinguish it in the algorithms. I'll decide after. I'm writing some pen name stuff now, and I'm just going to see how that goes, and just try and judge it after that, and maybe I'll put that under another name. We'll see.
Yeah, it's been a little tough because I have a pen name that I am not at all hidden, and I've got folks that just watch and are waiting for it to come out. So I'll have my epic fantasy over here with the science fiction man chest covers right next to it and the also bots, and I've just kind of given up. If I'm actually trying to launch something brand new, I will hold off like a couple weeks before emailing the other lists to try to actually appeal to, like, if it's a new epic fantasy, to just get those fantasy people. But those man chest covers just always showing up.
Yeah, you can't keep a good man chest down.
That's right. People want to see them. So before, you mentioned that you were doing some campaigns where you're actually only spending a couple dollars a day, and it's actually effective. We've had folks on here that are like, yeah, I spend $3,000 a month. And you, I think, mentioned in the book that you have to be like really good at the targeting to get the cheaper clicks. And it seems like you really need the cheaper clicks for a couple dollars to go anywhere. Do you have any tips for to really narrow it down and show your ad to the people who are most likely to click it?
Well, for those starting out with Facebook or BookBub ads or AMS or whatever, I think, there's a danger. Like, the natural artistic instinct for a writer is, I want everyone to read this story. I want everyone to read it. You want your coworkers, your mother, everyone to read it. And you want it to be read by a wide audience. And you've got to fight that instinct. You've got to drill down to your niche. You've got to think about your ideal reader. Think about the kind of books they like, and just try and exclusively target those people, especially at the start. That's really, really crucial. Afterwards, if you've dominated your niche, your category, you can seek to break out of it. But don't aim for that first. You've really got to drill down. And there's a danger of being all things to all people and appealing to nobody, ultimately, just by being bland. But in terms of specifically about your targeting, I think sometimes we can start including on Facebook other interests which might be slightly outside of our exact target audience. Like for some of my historicals, I might be thinking, oh, well, some of the action adventures crowd might enjoy this a little bit. But that's a huge mistake, because, you know, you can tell, like, if you're advertising on BookBub or Facebook and you start including these kind of these adjacent audiences, they're a real killer of the adjacent audiences, because, you know, these people might be interested in your book, but how much of that audience really will be interested in it? Is it 20%, 30%? That's not a lot. And if you're aiming a Facebook ad at one particular audience, and you really need to be getting, I don't know, a CTR of 2, 3, 4% for that ad to be working for you. If you start including these adjacent audiences, that CTR is going to drop down to like 0.4, 0.5%, and the ad will stop working for you. You really have to first ruthlessly and exclusively and relentlessly target your niche. And then if that's working out for you, you can build up from there. But don't try and skip that step. And in fact, like you might never take that step, and you might be better off never taking that step.
It sounds like this is sort of an interesting balancing act, because on one hand, like the standard logic for writing to market is that you try to spot a very large audience that therefore a very large pool of readers that are going to be interested in your book. But then it becomes very difficult to reach the entire audience and target correctly. So, like, is it easier is it easier if you have an inherently niche audience, or would you say that whittling down a broader genre is equally possible?
Well, like, to give the example of BookBub ads, which are a little bit simpler than Facebook ads. If you have a really cool image, which is half the battle with BookBub ads, and you're advertising a genuine deal, like a free book or a 99-cent book, anything else is kind of tough going on BookBub. But let's say you have all that in place, and then you just advertise it to a science fiction audience, and you don't narrow it by author. And you're thinking like, hey, it's space opera. Everyone likes space opera. What's the big deal? Your click-through rate is going to be about 0.2 to 0.5%, which means the cost of your clicks is going to be $1 or $2, and no one can make that work. But if you actually think about your ideal reader and the other authors they like, and pick out 4 or 5 of your very closest comp authors, and just target those on BookBub instead, those click costs are going to start coming down to 20 or 30 cents. And then you're rolling. You know, that's something you can really make work. So that's what you've got to think in terms of digital advertising. It's the opposite of traditional advertising. Traditional advertising was all about billboards and broadcasting and getting your message out to the widest possible audience. Digital advertising is the opposite. It's about narrowing down. It's about granular targeting. You know, like if you think about Amazon and the categories that you're putting your book in, if you just put it in fantasy, like, that's such a broad church that includes so many different flavors of thing that, you know, like, people who like urban fantasy aren't necessarily going to like grim, dark, epic fantasy. And yet you're going to be paying money to be showing your ad to people who have absolutely no interest in buying your book. So you really need to drill down wherever possible, whether that's with your keywords or categories on Amazon, with your BookBub ads, with Facebook, with everything, with the blurb, with the cover. Like, if you come up with a cover that only grimdark readers like and everyone else despises, that's a perfect cover, you know? So go with it, you know, let your freak flag fly.
So let me ask you, what has been the hardest obstacle to overcome when trying to target your ideal readers?
Well, like there's so many ways that you can go wrong. There's so many ways, but I think a lot of them spring from kind of first skipping that step and not spending enough time thinking about who it is you're writing for. But yeah, if you have an inexact idea of your ideal reader, or if you're lazy about that step and you just go straight to like throwing traffic at the problem, you can create a huge amount of problems for yourself. Like anyone that has made a mistake along the way, I'm thinking of several that I've made, which has resulted in, say, bad also bots attaching themselves to your book. Like that's a really, really hard cycle to break out of, because anytime you actually get a sales spike going, Amazon will then start recommending your book to all the wrong readers, because its system has an inexact idea of who the reader is for that book, because you messed up by pushing it out to the wrong audience. So anytime you can get sales going again, Amazon then kicks in and starts emailing all its customers saying, hey, you're going to love this book, but they're emailing the wrong people. And then nobody's buying it, so then they're letting it fall down the rankings and not pushing it anymore. So you're caught in this catch-22, and it's really hard to break out of that. You can only do it kind of with brute force, like by getting a BookBub and putting it free, or just by trying to throw massive marketing at it. It doesn't always work. So you've really got to avoid that. I think like when you first launch a book, that's when a book is most vulnerable, because it has no sales history. So let's say if I launch a book and 10 people I work with all buy it, but they're thriller readers and not science fiction readers, then the also bots are going to reflect that. And it's hard to break out of that. So I would say, like, for example, if you apply for a BookBub, this is a mistake that I have made before, and lots of people have made. And, everyone wants to get a BookBub. You apply for a BookBub and they don't give you your category that you applied for, and they offer you another one which isn't quite a good fit. Say no. Honestly, like if it's not your target audience, if it's a little bit outside, that could cause you long-term problems. Have
you ever considered writing a book that says, hey, don't do what I did? It might be. I think a bunch of us authors should get together and say, hey, here's what I did wrong. Let's just go ahead and add it in there. But
that could be a brilliant anthology, like, everyone's mistakes all together.
So conversely, with that same question, what has been the easiest thing that you've learned that's when it comes to trying to target your ideal audience?
Well, like clicking on Facebook Insights, like it's like 2 clicks, and then Facebook says your ideal reader is a woman between the age of 35 and 54 who has a postgraduate education and owns her own home. And it took me 2 clicks to find that out. Thank you, Facebook. You've just saved me lots of money in targeting my ads. So there is a lot of this information out there at your fingertips if you dig around and look for it.
A few months ago on your blog, you did a post. You've been kind of observing that marketing is different for those people who are in Kindle Unlimited versus those who are successfully going wide. Could you talk about some of the different things you're seeing people doing? Because like you said, it's not the same beast at all anymore. No,
it's not. Kindle Unlimited authors have, several key advantages. Like the first and most obvious one is that if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you're mostly going to borrow Kindle Unlimited books, because you have a choice of, a huge amount of top quality books in all genres pretty much that you can borrow for free. And you've already paid your $10 for the month. So, trying to convince someone to pay another $5 to read your book instead of this other great one with lots of great reviews, which they can get for free, like that's a tough sell. So there's already a huge chunk of the Amazon market that is kind of closed off to you if you're a wide author. Like if you have an existing fan, yeah, sure, they'll buy your books, but trying to convince a new person, that's a real uphill battle. Aside from that, and also, like, I think what people forget, like, I think people focus too much on, is Amazon tilting things in favor of Kindle Unlimited authors? And they do a little bit, but I think less than people popularly assume. What they do is something different, which is they have kind of a separate recommendation system for Kindle Unlimited readers. And it's less nefarious and insidious than people kind of assume. And it's typical Amazon. They focus on the reader and what the reader wants. And if I'm a reader who's already paid $10 for my Kindle Unlimited subscription, I don't want to be recommended all these books which cost money. I want the free ones. Recommend me those. So they basically have a separate recommendation pathway for these readers, which is largely driven by the popularity list. And they just filter out all the non-Kindle Unlimited books, because that's what people want in their recommendations. They only want Kindle Unlimited recommendations, so that's what Amazon gives them. So yeah, that's one whole little world carved out of Amazon now that you're not playing it anymore as a wide author. Secondly, when Kindle Unlimited launched, we were all worried about whether borrows would cannibalize our sales, because at the time we were getting about $140 for a borrow, and you know, if you were selling at $4.99 or $3.99, you were taking a big hit if someone borrowed your book instead of buying it. But it turned out, well, there's differing opinions on this, but in my opinion, I don't think borrows cannibalize sales. I think they're extra cream on top of sales for the most part. I think they cannibalize the sales of everyone who's not in Kindle Unlimited. So if I'm in Kindle Unlimited and you're not, I'm cannibalizing your sales. You're not cannibalizing, I'm not cannibalizing my own sales, because those Kindle Unlimited readers are choosing to borrow my book instead of buying your book. And thirdly, the third advantage that KU authors have is the 70% royalties on 99-cent countdown deals. And that one little decision by Amazon, which they probably didn't even give that much thought to, has changed things so much. Because if I'm in KU, and I'm actually not in KU, in case anyone thinks this is like some kind of propaganda message here, I'm just running down the angles. But if I'm in KU and I'm getting 70% on a countdown deal, that means I can spend twice as much on my marketing. You know, that means when I'm running my BookBub ads, I can put in higher bids, or my Facebook ads. I can tolerate twice as high cost per click on Facebook, because I'm getting 70% instead of 35%. You know, that's a game changer. And so what we've seen over the last couple of years, especially at the higher end of the market, people spending these crazy amounts, where some of them are spending up to $3,000 a day on Facebook, especially during their launches or whatever, which is insane. But it's not that insane, because they're making it back. You know, like if they're spending $3,000 a day and making, I don't know, $10,000 a day, that's not insane. That's great business. So if you're wide, you have to compete against all that, you know, and that's where it gets tricky. So, you know, what do you do? Well, all the other parts are going to have to work harder for you. Your mailing list is going to have to work harder. Your website's going to have to work harder. You're going to have to step out of the crazy firefight for readers in the US Kindle store and seek out cheaper pockets of readers in like Kobo Australia or Apple UK. And like if you're running BookBub ads, you'll notice your CTRs are way higher for targeting those readers than it is for targeting Amazon US, because those readers they don't have as many BookBub-like sites or ENT-like sites. They don't have as many 99-cent deals. The publishers generally, like if you look at somewhere like Australia, the price of books is totally crazy. So that means it's a deal-hungry market. If you can get a 99-cent deal in front of an Australian reader, they're going to gobble it up. So you might have an ad on BookBub with a 2 or 3% CTR on Amazon.com, and on Kobo Australia, if you're targeting those people with your BookBub ads, you might see a CTR of 5, 6, 7%, which is really driving down the cost of reaching those readers. So what I see a lot of people who are very successful wide doing is what I call micro-targeting campaigns, where they're seeking out, because they don't care where to get the sale. A sale is a sale is a sale. They're not chasing visibility on Amazon like the KU authors are. So they're happy to get a sale in Australia or Canada or anywhere. It doesn't matter. So if it's a quarter of the price for them to reach a Kobo reader in Australia versus an Amazon reader in America, they can do that. And that's what they're doing. So it's totally diverging. There's like two totally different marketing models emerging, and it's fascinating to me.
Right. If you're not worrying about your ranking so much on Amazon, you don't have to put all your eggs there. Who cares if the sale comes from South America, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And I think you also mentioned that with the KU people, they're tending to really emphasize like the week or two around the launch, and then the wide folks are maybe running these ads continuously and just kind of keeping a trickle of marketing going. Is that kind of how it's working?
Yeah, totally. I'm actually managing marketing for another author who's all in with KU, and I'm all in wide. So I get to see both sides of the fence at the moment. And what we do with his launches and his promos, like we do a big promo once a month, and we market for 5 to 7 days, and then we don't have any ads running the rest of the month, and that's it. And we can coast off that rank, or off that 5 to 7 day push, that KU push. we can coast off that for the rest of the month. And that's what we do. And then if I talk to people like Sarah Woodbury or Deanna Chase, who are killing it wide, they're total opposite, like lower level campaigns, like this kind of drip marketing, where it's kind of like 1,000 little streams coming together into a mighty river. And I think it's important that if you're wide or in KU, that you try and match the marketing approach to your distribution methods. Like if you're wide and you're trying to compete, if you're putting all your marketing focus into the Amazon, the US Amazon market, and trying to compete there in terms of BookBub ads and Facebook CPCs, like maybe there's a better way. Maybe some of that budget, some of it, I don't think you should ignore the American market ever, or Amazon ever. That's foolish. But at least some of that budget and some of that effort should be going towards trying to seek out readers in cheaper pockets around the world, because a sale is a sale.
Now, obviously, like KU, the entire purpose of KU is to, Kindle Select, I should say, is to give special promotional tools to the people who are exclusive. Are there worthwhile tactics that are unique to being wide?
Well, yeah, I think, like, as I said, like the other parts have to work harder for you, because, you're essentially, you're stepping back a little bit from the Amazon firefight, and especially the US Kindle Store firefight. So that means the other parts have to step up. Like when I look at super successful wide authors, they generally have a slicker website. They generally are running like Facebook lead gen campaigns, and they generally have bigger mailing lists. Like I know some guys who are killing it on KU and they barely have a website. And the mailing list is kind of an afterthought, because they're working the algorithm so much that that's all they're focused on. But if you're wide, then everything else has to work harder for you. I think it's more important to be doing things like going to conferences and networking with retailers and trying to get merch placement. Definitely being more aggressive about building up your mailing list and having that being a big source of ongoing sales for you. Like you probably need to be taking a newsletter approach to your mailing list more than a new release kind of approach. But yeah, you've got to. The big thing I think in terms of direct marketing and in terms of finding new readers is seeking out, like doing those micro targeting campaigns, seeking out readers in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, and outside of Amazon, because the clicks generally are much, much cheaper.
With regards to how much Amazon favors authors who use KU, would you say new non-exclusive authors have a chance of striking it big anymore?
Well, yeah, there's people constantly breaking out in whether they're wide or in KU. I would actually look to your genre more than your where you are in your career path. Like I see some people saying it might be easier to start out in KU and then go wide. I don't know, maybe. But I would look more to the genre. Like in my genre of historical fiction, that isn't really a KU genre. So I'm comfortable going wide with that. And same with my writer books, actually. I tried them in KU and I know how to work the system, but they weren't getting a lot of reads. And I think it's because readers, like if I think about my ideal reader and I talk to them, which I do because they're authors and I talk to them all the time, they want to own those books. So they want to be able to refer back to them in a couple months later of like, oh, what did that guy say about formatting or something, and go back and look at the book. So they don't want to borrow them, they want to own them. So that makes sense. But then if I was, in a genre which is dominated by KU, I would strongly consider being in KU. Like I'm not out of KU because I'm pissed off at Amazon or scamming or, those things are factors, minor factors. Like if my books got a lot of reads, I would be in KU. If my readers were KU subscribers, I would be in KU. I just follow the readers. So I would let your genre guide you more than anything. And experiment, try being wide, try being in KU. You can agitate for, author rights and, you can hate KU, but if it works for you and, everyone's got to put dinner on the table, like do what works for you and do what gets you the most readers.
We had Mark Coker on earlier in the year, and he mentioned that a lot of the authors that were were successful wide were that the Perma free book one was still working, or at least having a free book one for a time. Is that something you try, or is that something you're also seeing the successful authors, the wide authors, doing?
I think, yeah, like perma-free is definitely something that wide authors have gotten a lot of joy from. And I think it still works. I've heard some people saying that it's harder now to get a perma-free book to work for them, especially on Amazon. There's some people talking that perma-free books are getting buried a little bit. But I don't know. I think it's another tool in your toolbox. It's something that if you're wide especially, that you can try. It's one of those extra tools that you have to play with versus someone who's in KU. And BookBub ads as well, BookBub deals, you know, they're a lot easier to get if you're wide. So that's something else you can lean on if you're wide. So like rather than complaining that, you know, KU authors get more visibility or have advantages, whatever, think about your advantages, think about your strengths, think about the things that you can do that they can't, or the things that you have to emphasize that they won't, and give yourself the edge that way.
Now, earlier you were talking about how if you sort of, if your launch gets botched and you drop it out of the algorithm, and you know your rankings are low enough that Amazon's not pushing you anymore, it's problematic, and you're most vulnerable in the beginning. Let's say you've got a series starter for a reasonably long series that's a couple of years old now. Is it worth pushing advertising to the series starter still, or should you be thinking about a new series at this point?
Well, it depends. It depends what the exact problem is. Like if books 2 to 6 are in great shape, and you know you're seeing great sell through after that first little hump, then maybe I would republish the first book, or you know I would look at what it needs. Like, does it need a new cover? Does it need another draft? Does it need another editing pass? Or is it like something you did wrong with the launch and it has bad also bots, and might be worth republishing it under a fresh ASIN and just hooking it back up to the series again? So it really depends. Like, but if the whole series is kind of borked and you can't, it's not something that looks genuinely fixable without rewriting the whole thing, I would just keep bulldozing forward. So yeah, it depends.
And so my final question for you would be is, what advice would you give if a brand new author about to publish his or her first title approaches you and asks for input? What would you say?
Keep going. Well, like, it's a brand new author just wants to know what to do. Well, like don't worry so much about, you know, I think when you're just about to publish your first, what you need to do is focus on, you know, making sure the story is as good as you can write it, making sure you present it in a professional manner, similar to other bestsellers in your niche. Don't try and be too original at this point. Make sure it's something that's not too unfamiliar to readers. And then put it aside and start working on the next, and keep your head down and just keep at it.
All right, great. And we have just a few questions from Twitter to wrap things up. Been going for about an hour, so we'll let you go soon. Dale is wondering, what's the one thing you see wide authors doing wrong with their marketing?
It's trying to compete with KU authors in markets where they're, you know, it's like trying to bring a knife to a gunfight. If you're trying to compete in the Amazon US Kindle store, if you're going into a BookBub, like if you're in a bidding war on BookBub or Facebook with someone who's getting twice the return on a 99-cent deal, you know, that might end well for you. I think you've got to expand your focus a little bit and start thinking about, can some of that budget be directed towards Kobo readers in Canada, or, you know, maybe even Amazon Australia or something, you know, because I think KU authors generally focus on the US and the UK. They often don't focus on Canada and Australia because they can't run countdown deals there. So that maybe there's, if you want to keep some of that spend on Amazon, just shift it over to Canada or Australia and play around with that a little bit.
It is hard to let go of that ego thing of like, everybody looks at how you're doing in the Amazon US store and, you know, like, oh, that can't be a very good author right there. She's a 500,000 sales ranking. So, but I think that's good advice. We had Patty Jensen on here mentioning that she's running ads to South Africa, and that they're eating them up because nobody else is advertising to them.
Yeah, fresh market. You know, like I get a lot of joy personally from Canada. I find my advertising dollar goes further there than anywhere else. And maybe it's just a slightly overlooked market. I don't know, or maybe I innately appeal to Canadian people, but I doubt that. I think it's just because I'm pushing it a little bit more there. So yeah, like if you can find a pocket of value anywhere that is, and you get a little bit of momentum going for whatever reason, like double down on that. Like if I think about the authors who I know who are doing the best wide, and I remember asking them this about a year ago. I was like, "What percentage is your Amazon sales?" And because if you think about it, Amazon has about 75% of the market in the US, and about 90% in the UK, a bit less in Canada. I'm not sure about Australia, but if you talk to the typical indie, usually their sales will be about 90% Amazon, even if they're wide. But the guys who are doing really, really well, Amazon drops to about 50% of their sales because they've found ways to target these readers, and it's a much more open market because so many indies and so many big selling indies are in KU now, that their only real competition in a lot of these reader pockets around the world are publishers. But if you think of everything stupid that publishers do in America, they do it doubly so in Canada and Australia and Europe. Like they'll be releasing new ebooks for $24 or something in Australia. So if you come along with a 99-cent deal, people are all over.
All right, good point. And we've kind of been talking about this, but Holly was wondering if you have any recommendations for people who want to move out of KU and kind of start from scratch and actually sell some books wide.
Be super patient. It's not going the other way is easier, right? You can launch with a blast in KU if you're going from wide to KU. If you're going the other way, be really patient. It's a slow build. It takes a while. Be prepared to be doing a lot of experimentation and testing. It's a bit more hassle with regards to your focus is going to be spread around the place, but just remember that you'll take a sale anywhere. You're not seeking to be a bestseller in the 47 different markets that your books are going to be in. You're just trying to find somewhere to get the ball rolling, and then you can add to it and add to it.
Yeah, we had the Kobo folks on, and they were saying like the worst thing you can do is, do 3 months in KU and then go try wide, but only give it like 3 months and then kind of jump back and forth, and that you're just
no, definitely don't do that, because like it's you can do that going into KU. You can go in and shake the KU money tree for 3 months, maybe 6 months, and then jump out. But wide definitely takes a longer commitment. You've got to be prepared to say, okay, I'm doing this for a year or more, and I'm going to see where it goes. Because you got to remember, like if you've been in KU for a while, all your readers are going to be on Amazon. All your mailing list is going to be on Amazon. So it's not like when you magically release your next book, there's going to be 1,000 people on Apple waiting to buy it. You've got to build that up. I think people forget that every single market you have to start from zero again. And this goes for if you're a huge trad author in the UK and you're launching in America, you're nobody. You've got to build it up again. And people forget. They think it spills over. It doesn't. You start from zero everywhere. But if you can get it rolling everywhere, then you've got a hugely sustainable career where you're not at the whims of an algorithm changing or Amazon suddenly putting a fatwa on you for whatever reason. So that's the upside.
Right. And Nicolette was curious, you've been talking about the international marketing to those guys. She wants to know if you're segmenting your mailing list by region on store, or if you're relying more on BookBub or Facebook ads, or I guess how you're reaching these people.
I haven't gotten that deep into segmentation yet. I know some people are starting to do that, and they're tagging everyone on their list in various different clever ways, so that they know who's coming from which store. And to be honest, part of the reason I haven't done it is because most of my list is definitely Amazon people. I've only got a small number of Apple and Kobo readers, and virtually no Barnes and Noble readers for some reason. But yeah, I know some people are doing that. But no, I'll do that. I'll do that mostly on BookBub, actually. That's the easiest way to explicitly target, BNN readers or Apple readers, whatever. You could do it on Facebook too. It's a little trickier sometimes to get your ads to serve to the level where you can actually kind of judge what's going on and decide what to double down on. But BookBub is super easy to do that. You can pick whatever pocket you want to target and work from there. And it's really handy these days. Actually, you can just switch on and off each little market that you want to target or not target, depending on how the ad's going. And what's super interesting is you can run the same ad graphic, to readers in 5 different markets, and it can perform radically differently. which is interesting. And you can probably go down that rabbit hole forever, but I just switch on and off the button depending on how the ad is going.
Yeah, last question we've got here, and I do agree. I love BookBub for that because, you know, they actually have a place to put your link for, like, if you want to target the India store, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Or the
And
English.
I made up a specific ad graphic with like a symbol with rupees and everything to target Indian readers, and it didn't work actually, but it's always good to test everything.
Definitely. All right, last question is from Rebecca, and she wants to know what's the best way to build a mailing list organically without spending much money?
Okay, well, I used to be the worst person in the world at mailing lists, and now I am a lot better. I totally changed my approach in January. I took a course in December, which was amazing, and I decided, like, you know, instead of doing the usual thing where I disagree with everything and I question everything, I'm just going to do everything that I'm told, even if it's the opposite of what I've already been doing. So, like, I used to just have a new release mailing list where I would only email people when I had a new book. But that's a problem when you're not producing books very quickly, especially like my historical fiction is, they're a long time to research and slow to write. So people would kind of forget who I was in between books because I wasn't emailing them every week or month or when I had a deal or whatever. I was literally only emailing them when I had a new release. So yeah, I stopped doing that in January, and I emailed my list and I said, hey, this list is changing now. I'm gonna start emailing you every week, and if you don't want to do that, then unsubscribe or whatever. And I was a bit nervous about it, but it's gone really, really well. And so, like, every week for my nonfiction list, I send out like tips and tricks for marketing. I've been doing like a series on BookBub ads and just different marketing things, like something every week, and just not trying to sell a book. Like, it's not like one of these, you know, emails where like 800 words have build up and then they hit you with a thing to sell you something at the end. It's just genuinely giving them something and not asking for stuff, and just seeing how that's going. And it's been going really, really well. Like, my open rates have doubled, click rates have doubled as well. And then my release went really, really well. So I'm definitely going to keep going with this strategy. So what I would say for someone starting out is make sure that every email you send has value in it. Try and write the email like you're talking to one person, and you probably will be talking to one person at the start, so that's going to be easy. But try and maintain that focus as your list grows. Like, I think it's important to have that one-to-one connection where someone's actually talking to you in an intimate way, rather than, you know, speaking through a loudspeaker at 4,000 people or whatever. But no, the most important thing is give them value in every email. Contact them regularly. Like, you don't need to email them every week. That's just something that works for my nonfiction crowd. For fiction, once a month is probably fine. But make sure you're in touch regularly, because that will make sure that your emails end up in their inbox and not in spam. But it also builds up a personal connection between you and the reader. Make sure you're delivering value every week and not just asking for something, that you're giving something all the time or every month, depending on how regularly you email them. And then when it comes around to the time where you're actually launching a book or asking for something like maybe a review or to share news about a sale, you'll get a much better response, because you've built up a level of trust, and your emails are actually something they look forward to, rather than, you know, like, if you think about yourself going through your inbox, like, there's just so much spam or so many emails from like the furniture store, you know, that you don't care about, like happy birthday from the furniture store. Does not just make you feel so good. So yeah, you don't want to be one of those guys. You want to be someone whose emails they look forward to reading. So what you need to do is try and figure out the kind of content, just like with your Facebook page, try and figure out the kind of content that your ideal reader likes, and give it to them regularly. Keep in touch with them. And then when it comes around to the time of actually launching something, you'll get a much better response. And it'll actually be a list that people want to be on, rather than, oh, I'm just going to sign up for this because I don't want to miss this or whatever. They'll actually want to be on your list, like, and you will actually get replies from people. And you should reply back to them and have an actual conversation. Like, aside from building the human connection, that's something that looks great to the spam filters. They're like, well, this guy has actual organic conversations with people on his list, so it's probably not a spammer.
All right. Well, there's been a lot of great information on this show. We're going to wrap things up. But before we go, where can people find you? And do you have any books you'd like people to check out?
Yeah, well, like as I was saying, I have a mailing list for authors. Every Friday, I send out marketing tips, and if you sign up to my list, not only will you get those tips every Friday, you'll also get a free book called Amazon Decoded, and it's the only place you can get that book. It's a mailing list exclusive. You can't actually buy it. So yeah, if you go to davidgaughran.com or just Google my name, you'll find me. You can sign up to my list. You'll get a free copy of the book, and it breaks down how the Kindle store works and the popularity list and how to work KU and all that stuff. I also have a couple other books for writers that you can check out on my site, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well.
All right, and you're going to find links to this stuff on the post on marketingsff.com. This is episode 179. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Nice to meet you, David. Thanks for all the info.
Bye-bye, everybody.